I found out what my daughter had been doing, and it broke me. People think children are naive, that they don't notice suffering, that they move through the world too distracted by cartoons, games, and school drama to recognize when someone is hurting. But sometimes children see pain more clearly than adults do. Because adults are trained to look away, kids aren't. And my daughter proved that to me in a way I'll never forget. It started so subtly that I didn't think much of it at first. My daughter Emma had always been a small eater. The kind of kid who took 3 bites of dinner and then claimed she was full before asking for dessert 20 minutes later. So when she suddenly started asking for extra food every morning, I honestly thought she was just growing. At first it was little things. Can I have 2 juice boxes today? Can you pack another sandwich? Can I bring extra crackers? Normal kid stuff. She was 12 years old, right at that age where growth spurts happen overnight, and suddenly they eat like starving athletes for 6 months straight. So I packed more food, no big deal, but then I started noticing something strange. Every single day, she came home absolutely starving. Not regular hungry, desperate hungry. She'd walk through the front door and immediately head for the kitchen before even taking her backpack off. Can I make noodles? Is there anything left from dinner? Can I have cereal too? It didn't make sense. I was packing enough food for an adult construction worker at that point. Meanwhile, grocery prices were already suffocating us. I'm a single father with 2 kids. There's no dramatic tragedy behind it. Their mother simply left years ago and slowly faded out of their lives until birthdays became occasional text messages. So it's mostly just been me trying to keep everything together. Bills, work, school, laundry, dinner, repeat forever. We weren't starving, but we definitely weren't comfortable either. Every extra grocery trip mattered. Still, Emma insisted she needed more food every day. And because I loved her, I kept finding ways to make it work. A week later was her birthday, 12 years old. Old enough to stop wanting little kid parties, but young enough to still secretly love them. We couldn't afford anything huge, but I decorated the house with cheap streamers from the dollar store and ordered pizza. Her younger brother spent the entire afternoon blowing up balloons until he got dizzy. Emmy acted embarrassed about the decorations at first, then immediately smiled when she thought I wasn't looking. That's parenthood in a nutshell, pretending not to notice your kids, pretending not to care. Around 4 in the afternoon, parents started dropping kids off. The house quickly became chaos. Music, laughing, kids yelling over each other. The smell of pizza and frosting. For a few hours, everything felt normal. Good, even then the doorbell rang again. I opened the door expecting another exhausted parent holding a gift bag. Instead, there was just a little boy standing alone on the porch. He looked tiny for his age, painfully thin, wearing oversized clothes that looked heavily worn and slightly dirty around the sleeves. Even before he spoke, something about him hit me hard in the chest. Not because he looked dangerous, because he looked neglected. Like life had already been difficult for far too long. He held a wrinkled birthday card carefully in both hands. "Hi," he said quietly. "I'm here for Emma's birthday." I looked behind him instinctively, expecting a car nearby. Nothing. "Where are your parents?" He shrugged. "My mom wouldn't bring me." The answer came so casually it hurt. Then before I could say anything else, Emma suddenly sprinted into the hallway. He came. She practically tackled the poor kid with a hug. I remember the boy looking shocked for half a second before smiling in a way that completely transformed his face. Kids who rarely feel included react differently to kindness. You can see it instantly. "This is Daniel," Emma announced proudly. "The friend I told you about." I smiled and let him inside, but something already felt heavy in my chest, because children don't usually walk alone 3 miles to birthday parties unless home isn't a very warm place to be. At first, Daniel stayed extremely quiet, while the other kids screamed over video games and fought over pizza slices. He mostly stood close to Emma like he was afraid of doing something wrong. I offered him drinks and snacks several times before he finally whispered, "Could I maybe have chocolate milk?" The way he asked nearly broke me by itself. So careful, so uncertain. Like he expected the answer to be no. I handed him a glass. And I swear to God, the expression on that child's face looked like I'd handed him treasure. He drank it almost instantly, not rudely, just fast in the way kids do when they're genuinely hungry. Then he smiled at me. Thank you. That smile destroyed me. Because it wasn't just gratitude, it was relief. Meanwhile, the other kids barely touched their drinks before running off again. Daniel, on the other hand, carefully licked the chocolate mustache off his lip so none would go to waste. That was the moment something inside me started connecting dots. Later, during pizza, I noticed something else. Emma kept quietly sliding food toward him. An extra slice, breadsticks, chips. Not dramatically, subtly practiced. Like this wasn't the first time she'd done it. And suddenly, everything clicked so hard it physically hurt. The extra lunches, the constant hunger after school, the disappearing snacks. My daughter hadn't been eating the food I packed her. She'd been feeding him every day. I had to walk into the kitchen for a minute because I genuinely felt emotional enough to cry, not because I was angry. God, I couldn't have been angry if I tried. I was devastated. Because my 12-year-old daughter had quietly recognized another child was starving and decided helping him mattered more than her own hunger. And she'd done it without asking for praise. Without telling anyone, without expecting recognition. Just pure instinctive kindness. I leaned against the counter trying to collect myself, while the sounds of laughing kids echoed through the house. And honestly, I felt simultaneously heartbroken and proud in a way that's difficult to describe. As the night went on, I paid closer attention to Daniel. The signs became impossible to ignore afterward. How quickly he ate. How carefully he handled everything handed to him. How nervous he seemed whenever adults spoke directly to him. At one point, one of the kids accidentally knocked over a bowl of chips. Daniel immediately dropped to the floor, helping clean it up while apologizing repeatedly even though it wasn't his fault. Trauma teaches children to make themselves small. And once you notice that behavior, you never stop seeing it. The hardest moment came during cake. Every kid grabbed a slice and immediately started talking again. Daniel sat quietly staring at his plate for several seconds before taking tiny careful bites like he wanted the experience to last longer. Emma noticed too. She quietly pushed half her slice onto his plate when she thought nobody was looking. He whispered, "You should eat it." "I'm full," she lied instantly. I almost lost it right there. Eventually, parents started arriving to pick everyone up. The house slowly emptied until only Daniel remained. I asked if someone was coming for him. He shook his head. "I can walk." "How far away do you live?" Another shrug. "Not super far." Emma immediately jumped in. "It's okay, Dad. He walks all the time." That sentence bothered me deeply. All the time, at night too apparently. A skinny 12-year-old walking miles alone regularly. "Absolutely not. I'll drive you," I said firmly. Daniel instantly looked anxious. "You don't have to. It's no problem." The fear on his face confused me until years of parenting translated it. Kids from unstable homes often panic about being a burden. He genuinely thought accepting a ride was asking too much. Before leaving, I went upstairs to grab my keys. That's when I overheard them talking quietly in Emma's room. I wasn't trying to spy, I just froze when I heard rustling bags. Peeking around the corner, I saw Emma stuffing things into Daniel's backpack. Granola bars, juice boxes, fruit snacks, a jar of peanut butter. Then, after glancing toward the hallway nervously, she grabbed some of her younger brother's old clothes from a donation pile. "Here," she whispered. Daniel immediately shook his head. "I can't take that. You need them more than we do." His eyes watered instantly, so did mine. Then, Emma hugged him tightly and whispered something that shattered me completely. "You don't have to save it all for your mom this time." Silence, absolute silence inside my chest. Because suddenly I understood even more. The lunches probably weren't only feeding Daniel. They were feeding his family too. The drive to his house was devastating. Not because of anything dramatic, because of how long it lasted. 3 miles turned into what felt like an eternity emotionally. The farther we drove, the worse the neighborhood became. Streetlights broken, buildings crumbling, people lingering outside despite the cold. Daniel stayed quiet almost the entire ride except to politely thank me every few minutes. When we finally stopped in front of a tiny rundown duplex, my stomach sank. Several windows were covered with blankets instead of curtains. The porch leaned dangerously sideways. I could smell cigarette smoke before he even opened the car door. "You live here," he nodded quickly like he was embarrassed. Then, before getting out, he hesitated. "Can Emma still come to school lunch with me Monday?" That question nearly broke me completely. Not "can we hang out?" Not "can she come over again lunch?" Because to him, lunch meant food. And maybe safety for 20 minutes. I swallowed hard. "Of course she can," he smiled softly. Then grabbed the backpack full of hidden snacks like it contained gold. Before running inside, he turned back and said, "Thank you for the best birthday party ever." I had to sit in the car for a minute after he disappeared inside because I genuinely couldn't breathe normally. That night after the kids went to bed, I sat alone in the kitchen thinking about how close suffering exists to us without anyone noticing. Daniel attended the same school, lived only a few miles away, sat beside well-fed children every day. And somehow most adults, including me, had completely missed what was happening. Except Emma hadn't, because children notice hunger immediately. Adults get distracted by paperwork and assumptions. Kids just see another kid hurting. I realized then that kindness isn't something we teach children nearly as much as something they naturally possess until the world trains it out of them. Emma didn't calculate whether helping Daniel was practical. She didn't wonder whether it was her responsibility. She just saw someone hungry and shared her food, simple as that. The next morning, I started making lunches differently. 2 sandwiches, 2 juice boxes, 2 bags of chips, every single day. I never officially discussed it with Emma, didn't want to embarrass her. But the first morning she saw the second lunch already packed beside hers, she froze. Then slowly looked up at me. I just shrugged casually. Growing kids need extra food. For a second, I thought she might cry. Instead, she walked over quietly and hugged me really tightly. And that was enough. I can't afford to adopt another child. I can barely keep my own household afloat some months. Life isn't a heartwarming movie where suddenly everything works out perfectly. But I can pack extra sandwiches. I can drive Daniel home when it's cold. I can pretend not to notice pantry snacks disappearing sometimes. And maybe that's what matters most, not saving the world. Just refusing to ignore the person in front of you. My daughter understood that before I did. Honestly, I think that's the moment I realized she was becoming a better human being than most adults I know.